It's interesting because when I first got the invitation to do this talk, first thing I felt was fear. I was scared. I had never done something this big with a camera rolling on me in front of so many people before, and to be honest, that's what I felt. To the point where I almost didn't want to do the talk. I was about to turn it down. But I chose to do it because I believe that change is so important, and we need to start embracing that. So that's why I'm here today. When I was growing up, I had a pretty normal life. I was happy. I was that kid who played a lot of sports. I enjoyed playing with friends, and everything was normal for me. I had a good time. I was lighthearted. I had no care in the world. Everything was just carefree. Probably something that you can all relate to. But then something monumental happened in my life. I became very depressed. I was leaving high school. It was a point where I was, feeling the pressures of what am I going to do after high school? What's going to happen when I have to choose what it is that I want to do? Everybody around you is choosing their career. They're choosing what they're going to study in school. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And regardless of all the pressures that were happening, I was so confused. I know I wanted to work with my hands. I wanted to do something that I enjoyed, but I had no idea what it was, and nothing was interesting to me. Regardless of that, and regardless of the fact that I had no idea what I wanted to do, I chose to just go to school. I studied engineering at first, and I dropped out of that. Then I went into business, and I dropped out of that. And then I went into marketing, and I dropped out of that. 3 programs in 3 years, and in that 3rd year, it's when I found myself sitting in a comfy chair across from a therapist. I was depressed. I had no idea how my life had led me here. I was anxious all the time. I didn't like what I was doing in school. I couldn't believe that life was, you go to school, you get an education, you get a career, family, house, live till you're 65, retire, and then do whatever happens next. That freaked me out because I couldn't believe that's all life was. I wanted there to be more. I wanted it to be something that was joyous, something that was, you get to explore your passions, and I wasn't seeing that. I wasn't feeling that, and I couldn't see it in others around me. So in the sessions with my therapist, I began to realize that the biggest issue that I was having was that I was not doing things for myself. I was doing things for everybody else, making choices based on what my parents wanted, what my friends wanted, or what everybody else was doing around me. And I believe that this is an issue that a lot of kids have because they're not taught to really explore themselves when they're growing up. And so when you get to situations where you have to make big life choices and there's a lot of pressure around you, you look to those around you that you've trusted your whole life. And oftentimes it leads to situations like I've had. I just had no idea what I wanted to do, so I went forward with it anyway. In realizing that I had to stop doing things for other people, I needed to do it for myself, I chose to leave school the very next day with the guidance of my therapist, of course. She was the first adult that ever had said, Joe, it's okay if you left school. It would be totally fine. So I did. Came home the very next day. I said, Mom, I'm done. She goes, well, what do you mean? You only had 1 class today? I said, no, I'm done. I'm never going back. And she looked at me and she said, well, you can explain that one to your father. And it was in that moment that it comes back to why we're here today. I was choosing to do something different. I was choosing to be changed. I was choosing to take a different path, a path that's not often celebrated, nor is it that often used by people because it is scary. People around me were scared of the choices that I was going to make. And it comes back to, why are we so afraid? Why are we so afraid to do things differently when really what's so important is that we embrace change? We should not be fearing change. Change is something that's going to happen no matter what. Change is something that our very being is change. And so when I decided to leave school, as if my life was basically waiting for me to make this choice, everything changed. I met some friends who encouraged me to explore more about myself, who I was, what my passions were, how my beliefs were formed, how I functioned. They encouraged me to do things that I had never done before and that I was never taught. And I believe something that is so important to be done in school. Most kids, and even a lot of adults, truly don't understand their emotions as they get older. They don't understand what makes them tick a lot of the time. So I chose to leave school, met some friends, and I got to a point where a lot has changed in my life. And that's when Collective Evolution started. Collective Evolution is an organization with a very simple message. We inspire people to embrace change in their lives and in the way they see the world. CE encourages people to follow that feeling inside of them that tells us things can be different here. The world doesn't have to be like this. So, as Collective Evolution first started, it was about sharing personal development, about sharing things that basically allow people to explore themselves. We're just writing blogs. 4 years later, Collective Evolution blew up into an alternative media outlet that reaches millions of people all over the world every single month. We've also created 4 documentaries. Now, I believe that there's a couple reasons for why Collective Evolution exploded the way it did. I think, first of all, it kind of proves what the mission was looking to do, which is that people inside are looking for change, and they feel it. They know deep down that they want things to be different here, and they want to explore things differently. But I also believe that there's something even bigger that's happening, something huge that's happening to our entire world right now, and it's called a shift in consciousness. Now, those words are not so common, so what exactly does a shift in consciousness mean? Simply put, it's the shifting of how we see our world, how we see ourselves, each other, and how we choose to live on this planet. I believe this is all changing right now, and I think I can prove it. This is the third feature documentary we just released. We went on a journey across North America, and we spent 2 years exploring what exactly is happening with the world. There's revolutions, there's protests, there's people all over the place who are asking for change. Why? Why is it all happening right now, in a very short period of time, so quickly, all over the world? So we studied quantum physics, we studied spirituality, we studied science, we looked into ancient wisdom. And what we found was that there's a ton of information that links a lot of the events of today to this shift that many people are talking about. Since I can't go into every detail of what was shared in this documentary today, because this talk's not long enough, I wanted to focus on one very interesting factor, probably the piece that fascinated me the most. This here is a graph that correlates the number of sunspots that happen to the important historical events that are taking place on the planet. And this goes over thousands of years. What this is essentially saying is that there's a relationship that exists between our sun, the cosmic and solar flares that it releases to our planet, and human consciousness. Simply put, human awareness, the way we see our world. As you see the sunspots increase throughout solar cycles, as they reach peaks, you also see the number of historical events that are happening during that period also reach peaks, meaning there's more events happening. These events could be protests, they could be insurrections, they could be times of great peace, times of great change, or just the rising of brand new ideas. Although this graph ends around 1900 here, when research was picked up and continued by another professor, he was able to find that the trend continued throughout history. And even the Gulf War that was experienced happened at a time of increased solar activity. And even 9/11 happened at a time of increased solar activity. Great historical events are happening during times where human consciousness is being affected by the sun. But another key factor that I think relates to this is that when you look at a lot of ancient wisdom, and it's not just one culture or two cultures, but several cultures throughout the world, they refer to a time, the time we're in right now, where a lot of change would happen. I'm not talking about the 2012 prophecies here. I'm more so talking about the fact that these ancient cultures said that during the time that we're in right now, humanity would be going through a change in the way they see the world, a change in the collective worldview. in a practical sense, this might mean we might start looking at business differently. We might start looking at education differently. We might start letting go of the old ways and embracing new ideas. Not just in a typical fashion of evolution of thought and ideas, but in a way where it's happening so fast and so quickly. And this is why I think embracing change right now is so important. But even if we don't look at this data, we don't look at what the ancients said, and instead we just looked around the world and we said, what's going on? We paid attention very closely to what's happening. Now, I'm not saying what the mainstream media might be showing us, because I believe that that necessarily isn't always the full story. But when you look at your independent research and alternative media and stuff like that, you begin to find that there are people all over the world. Like, look at the amount of protests that have happened in the past few years. Huge, huge, huge uprisings are happening all over the place. People are asking for change, new ideas. Sustainability is growing like crazy. People want to be eating differently. They want to do things differently. This is clear. We can see this happening. And I believe that if we do take that look around, we do start to see that we're at a time of great change. Sometimes when I'm sitting at a table and there's a few people around, I ask, how many people want to live in a world the way we see it today? How many people want to live like that? Most of the time, nobody puts up their hand. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen anybody put up their hand. Now, I think this is for one of two reasons. Either people are not happy with every little tiny detail of what's going on in the world, and so they don't raise their hand, or that inherently within them, they believe that things need to change. And this is not the type of world they want to live in. After all, how would you like to live in a world where there was no war, there was no conflict, or didn't have to live in a world where you didn't have to work your entire life simply to survive? Or if everybody could have food and shelter? Is that the type of world you'd want to see? The reality is, these ideas are sometimes seen as radical. It's crazy. Joe, you can't have a world that works that way. It's not possible. Reality is, we created the world that we see today. Humanity created it. It wasn't all right, welcome to the planet, this is how it is, and you guys can all do what you want to do. No, we created this. And in that very sense, we can uncreate it and create something new. One of the greatest issues is that people don't realize that change starts within you. That change is something that we need to realize that it needs to begin within us. We can't just wait for the solutions to all be there before we start to say, yeah, change is possible and it's happening. Because it starts within. Now, the Institute of Heart Math has done some very interesting research. What they found was that the human heart releases an aura. That aura can be felt in this room. It could also be felt up to 1 kilometer away. Now, what they found was that if somebody's emanating, say, love, peace, joy, or anger, or even that it's impossible for the world to change, everybody else's brain that comes in contact with that aura, and this is a measurable frequency, decodes that information and starts to realize, hey, that's what that person's emanating. They believe that change is impossible, or they're feeling angry, they're feeling sad. It's like when you come into a room and there's one person in the room that's really happy. And you're kind of like, whoa, that person's really happy. And it's like making this energy that you just feel. This is all coming from the heart. And it all can be felt and decoded by each of us. So what is this suggesting? This is suggesting that within us all, the way we choose to think, what we choose to believe, what we choose to emanate out to the world, is having a great impact on those around us and what we ultimately create here. So if you choose to take the idea that it's impossible for the world to change, and that it's impossible for things to ever be different here, that's the message you're sending out to everybody. Change starts within. We have the power to come together and do things to change this world in any way we see fit. All we have to do is begin believing it and begin embracing it. That's the very first step. Every time I have conversations with people and we talk about these ideas, It's so easy for people to brush it off as, nope, it's impossible. Won't happen. You're crazy. Reality is, when you embrace it, things happen. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it in the lives of many people I interact with. The very first step is embracing that. I was invited here today because the organizers of TEDx believed that I was an agent of change. The reality is, you're all agents of change. And I believe it's time to start embracing that. Thank you.